All right, it looks like we're at the top of the hour. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, 5 Tips to Leapfrog Efficiency. My name is Sue Pogachnik, and I'm the Marketing Manager here at Wrightsoft, and I'll be helping moderate today's session. Thank you so much for joining us. Increasing efficiency means taking the waste or the non-value-added activities out of your business. Identifying that waste sometimes can be tricky, particularly waste that's related to motion or waiting time. But today's panelists from Wrightsoft are here to help. I'm pleased to introduce Ryan Winnicky, Wrightsoft Product Manager.
Hey, everyone.
And Garrett Lenzen, Wrightsoft Implementation Specialist.
Hello, this is Garrett.
During the next 30 minutes, Garrett and Ryan will discuss 5 tips you can implement now to help increase your overall efficiency with time tracking. Then Garrett will show you what digital time tracking actually looks like and how it can be the key to help identify inefficiencies in your business. But before we begin the discussion, we have a couple of housekeeping items to cover. So first, today's session is being recorded and all attendees are in listen-only mode. We will send you a link to the recording after the webinar airs. If you have any technical difficulties during the webinar, you can reach out to us in the chat button. And finally, we've allotted some time at the end of the webinar for Q&A. You can submit your questions at any time during the webinar, and then we'll respond to those at the end. Use your Q&A button to submit your questions. I think that takes care of our housekeeping items, and I'll turn the presentation over to Garrett and Ryan.
Thank you, Sue. Now, regardless of the industry that you are in, there are 7 different types of waste related to production efficiencies that are similar across industries such as transportation, inventory, motion, waiting, overprocessing, overproduction, and defects. We all know that efficiency is critical in today's competitive world. We have to optimize and try to reduce the activities that do not add value to our customers or derail us during our everyday work life, which leads us to our first tip. We need to evaluate our processes. Tour your facility with a fresh eye to see where the bottlenecks are. It might seem like a no-brainer, but one of the biggest efficiency gaps that we most often see stems from the processes that have evolved over time. Now, see your processes in action. Take along a new employee to help you observe. That fresh eye can help see things from a different perspective and maybe give input where you've not necessarily had it before. Ask those 5 questions. What is being done? Who does it? Is it an employee? Is it supervisor? Where do they do it? What location within our warehouse are they doing this in? When do they do it? At what time of the day? Is it in the morning? Is it in the afternoon? Now, at the end, why do they do it in a certain way? Now, Ryan, we've been on site at a few different customers. What have you seen as we bring in a different set of eyes?
Yeah, so one of the benefits we often get is we get to see multiple different organizations and what works well, what doesn't work well, why they're doing certain things. But the biggest value really comes from a fresh set of eyes when, we go on site to some of our customers and tour their facilities. We're constantly asking them those questions because we're trying to learn about that organization, what they're doing, why they're doing it. And honestly, it's a really good exercise for customers to do because just you as an organization having to answer those questions will challenge some of those things as to, are you doing it in the most efficient ways? Often we come along with an organization and you ask them why they're doing it a certain way. And the answer is, that's just how I was trained, or that's just how they were doing it before I got here. And sometimes that doesn't always mean it's the most efficient way. There's different things that change within the organization. And you can implement some of those new things that aren't as cemented in their processes as to why they're doing it, with taking a fresh look at what are the processes and why they're really truly doing those things.
Now, some of these things can really be a cause of frustration. Now, we don't always hear those different pieces unless we're talking to those new eyes. Now, we're all adults here, and unlike our Wrightsoft grandbaby here, he can't necessarily express that frustration. So when we take the time to really speak to those end employees that might be understanding and seeing these in real time, such as the frustration that they have, they should be able to voice it. Now, some of those things that can be, forgotten, such as, all right, I'm having a hard time with a forgotten password. I forgot it. Now, if I don't express that to my supervisor or to maybe a consultant that we're working with, it's hard for everybody to know and make the change that's according.
And one of the things, Garrett, just so the users understand too, that often when you're taking a look at the organization and what's actually happening, don't forget about those users that are truly doing some of those processes day in and day out to help understand some of their frustration areas, because sometimes it's the littlest things that can really improve process, that can really improve efficiency, and really improve the day-to-day life of those employees as well. So things like a barcode not being able to be scanned easily because it's too small. Unless you're really out there on the floor spending time with some of those users, you don't necessarily see some of those little things that can be happening that can be solved and actually make a very big improvement. One of the examples I go to is one of our customers. We were on site a few weeks ago, actually. I spent a fair amount of time with the operator that was tracking time. And they were tracking time through our solution. And one of the simple things that we were able to solve for them was their ability to log in quickly. They were barcoding their login, but then had to type in a password, and it just wasn't an efficient process. They didn't even know that there was a way to combine that to do a simple login with one scan. Until you go out there and see those things in action, you're not always going to realize some of those little things that can improve a day in the life of those employees.
And that's a great point there, Ryan. Bringing in that extra set of eyes really help bring that to light.
Mm-hmm. So with that being said, we just want to take a quick poll here to get a better understanding of where are the people on today's call in terms of tracking time. Do they track time on jobs or not? Do you do it on paper, spreadsheets? Do you use a solution, or maybe you don't do it at all? So I'm going to go ahead and launch this poll and give you guys a few, maybe 30 seconds or so to go ahead and answer that poll question. Let's see the results come in here. Give everyone just a little bit longer here. So it looks like the majority of customers on today's session aren't tracking time at all today, which is interesting because a lot of people are wanting to get to tracking time, but also know that your employees are super busy. So really looking at what is the value of tracking time and how's it going to improve your organization is sort of what we'll be looking at in the next couple slides as well. I'm going to go ahead and end that. Thank you, Garrett.
Absolutely. Now, one of the things that you can't improve upon is something that you don't measure accurately. If you already track time on paper or don't track time at all, or use multiple spreadsheets, it's hard to see what's truly happening in real time. Using a digital system to track time and attendance allows you to see the time that's spent on jobs or tasks, and also can help identify different inefficiencies and eliminate that waste that we mentioned earlier. Now, Ryan, we go through a lot of different facilities and we see how time's being tracked, whether if it is paper, if it's Excel, or if it is an older time clock solution. Now, what problems do you see that with those different solutions?
Well, one of the commonalities across all the organizations, whether they are tracking time, whether they're not tracking time, whether it's with the paper timesheets, it really comes down to making sure that tracking time isn't a burden for the employees or the organization and that they're truly getting value out of it. So often, for example, if you look at the paper process of if you guys have a job traveler or a work order, that you might be having your employees write down how much time they spent on each operation. It's a good rule of thumb, but at the end of the day, you have to know what are you doing with that data. Is somebody in the front office taking that timesheet or that work order and then entering it into the ERP at a later point? And are you looking at those numbers? If you're not measuring that data or utilizing that data, is it adding value to the organization? Real time is really where you start to get to the understanding of what the value of tracking time is. Often customers will do time studies to create standard estimates for their operations on certain parts or certain jobs. but do they always consider changes to processes in their organization that may improve some of those standards? So for example, one of our customers, they bought a new machine, and if they weren't using a solution to track time, their estimates would have been off, because when they bought that new machine, it cut the time in half for a specific operation on their estimates. So unless you really measure that information, you're not always able to implement that data into more effective data in your ERP solution to better cost out your jobs and better plan your organization as a whole. So one of the other customers we want to talk about is one of our customers called Hexagon Mining down in Tucson, Arizona. They decided to skip the paper spreadsheets to help them improve efficiency because they really just had it. What they do is they actually manufacture collision avoidance safety devices that are for preventing accidents in the mining industry. When Hexagon started vetting time systems, they really were kind of overwhelmed with the amount of different solutions that were out there in the space and what they were doing to track their production data and how that was actually going to carry over into a solution. So with Hexagon specifically, they actually had one full-time employee whose sole job was to compile the complex and inefficient spreadsheets that they had for the different time tracking that they were doing for time clock information, break information, job information, and task information. And they would take these reports and then generate them to input them into their ERP system. And they were doing this weekly, monthly, and quarterly. So really what this meant was all of that production data was always several days behind, and they had no visibility into what was really happening in real time, minus the supervisor knowing what was going on. So this really affected their ability to quickly analyze the status of their capacity and production output. They were in a growth stage, so they were really trying to closely measure this and understand where they needed to add people into the organization to continue their growth. And this also meant that their job standards were frequently changing because they were in that movement of changing their processes and modifying their facility as well. Not only to add to that, but COVID hit right during this time. And the production manager, one of the things that they needed was the ability to work remotely with everything going on. And after implementing Right Time, Hexagon was actually able to eliminate one full-time data entry position and allocate her time to another higher value role of actually managing the data and doing the more engineer roles that they could be doing. So on the other side, the production manager was also able to fully perform his job using Right Time remotely, as he was able to confidently work from home and then still understand what was happening from an operations side of things. So instead of having to constantly walk the production floor to know the status of a job or when it should be going into the next operation, the production managers was just able to see what was happening using Right Time. He didn't have to rely on his gut instinct to make decisions and know where things were at in the process, or if they were going to be behind on certain things. With Right Time, they were able to get the visibility they needed without having to wait days. The other big thing that they were really able to do was effectively generate their quarterly and monthly reports that they needed for production data with a simple click of a button that they had to export that data and generate their quarterly production reports.
Nice. So then we were on site with them. How did bringing that different set of eyes help bring up to light something that they could have been utilizing?
Yeah, it was really interesting because we were on site almost a year after they had already been using Right Time. And I actually think that it was almost more beneficial for us as an organization than it was maybe for them even, because we were able to really see how their users were using it in a little bit different setting than a typical manufacturing setting. Being able to see how each user had their own workstation and their own laptop basically to track their time. And they were able to see the jobs that were coming in the queue that they were working on, along with barcode scanning those work orders. So it was really a mixed mode. And then the other real value that I think we personally as an organization were able to see was really the data and how they were consuming and utilizing all of the data that was being collected for production utilization rates and understanding where their downtime was, understanding where they could have improved, they were very advanced in generating those reports and really trying to understand how to measure from a month-on-month basis, as well as a quarter-to-quarter basis on their production per department, per work center, utilizing the right time.
All right. Now, one of the 7 wastes identified when moving to some of this lean manufacturing is to reduce that excessive motion. Now, motion includes the motion of equipment and operators as they move unnecessarily throughout the warehouse or from work center to gain different pieces of information, whether if it's paperwork that's disrupting the workflow, if it's a blueprint that I need to go to my QC office and get to make sure my quality on the specific part is correct or we're within line. Now we have to think of how much time that actually spends, because you might stop, you might get coffee, you might talk to another coworker of yours. Now we have to understand how much time that actually takes throughout the day. Now, when we start skipping some of those different steps, you can actually start to really use right time to count where that efficiency is coming from and providing certain users with that visibility and that monitoring performance that Ryan just previously mentioned. Now, digital time tracking allows us to do that. Before, you would have users that have to go and check, all right, what says on your paper time card, if you're even tracking production time or time clock punches out on the floor. And it sees those gaps of, okay, what did you do? You stopped this job and now you're 15 minutes later starting a new one. It should have continuously gone through. So some of those different pieces that we needed to be visible against and reduce that motion. Now, part of it as well is reducing some of this idle time, as I mentioned, is, all right, we're stopped with this next job and now we're waiting for what? To start the next job? What are we waiting for? There is 30 minutes of downtime here as we all try to become as lean as possible and get our jobs into production instead of having that idle time. Now, the biggest thing is, do we currently have the means to identify this? Is it possible to have a system that says, all right, this person's been done for 30 minutes or this job has been completed at this time and it's been back to whether ERP or, payroll, whatever we're using. So it's key to use a system to help identify and reduce some of those idle times.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. I think the funny part about time tracking is one of the most common questions or common concerns, I should say, that customers have is, I want to track time, but I don't want to have my employees spend time tracking time. And it's really critical because it's a very true statement. As you look at efficiency and the value that time tracking is going to add to your organization, it doesn't add value if it takes more time to track their time than it does to actually get the valuable information out of it. So a lot of our customers, it's really working through that process to understand how can we efficiently track time and not burden those employees at the same time, being able to capture that data that we need to make better decisions and really improve our organization as a whole.
Now, one of the biggest ways that we can help do that is and gain that efficiency is, all right, have a system that can help tell that user what they necessarily have to work on instead of going to maybe a whiteboard that's listed out with all the different jobs or those packets of job packets saying this is what's next to work on. Now, here at RightSoft, we've been doing our own little homework, reading a book, How to Eat That Frog by Brian Tracy. It's taught us, how can we help prioritize certain tasks throughout our day. And we're trying to bring that into our solutions to help you as an organization. How can I more effectively prioritize what my users need to work on and display that to them in an efficient manner by sending that to them through a system where they don't necessarily have to leave their workstation to grab that extra information.
And if you think about your day, basically, everybody has some way of prioritizing or scheduling what they should be working on, whether it's utilizing your calendar, whether it's utilizing your to-do list like this that you have written on your piece of paper for the day. Some people have their desk covered in sticky notes. What we're all really looking to do is how can we be more efficient and effective at prioritizing that to-do list and also communicating that to a team as a supervisor or as a manager. In the manufacturing world, the better we can communicate those priorities, it all ties back to reducing that wasted time standing around wondering what I should work on next. We're all very agile now in the manufacturing space of being able to adjust priorities with the supply chain shortages. You might be working on one job and a part comes in that you've been waiting on and your team has to shift. Being able to communicate that effectively in real time is really what helps customers be more nimble and be more impactful in what they're doing as you're trying to increase some of those bottlenecks within your organization.
All right, now next we're going to dive into a quick demonstration of what right time looks like today and how it can help increase some of these efficiencies and display the information to those users. So I'm going to switch over my screens here and we will show you what right time looks like today. So just give me one moment and I will get my screen up here.
I'll let you know when we can see that, Garrett.
Perfect, thank you. All right.
Perfect.
All right, so now if you can see my screen, we're going to start here in our login screen. And I'm going to switch to one key area that helps display to our end users exactly what we're going to be doing. You know, we're trying to make this as simple for those end users as possible. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to my link. As you can see, right time is just running in a Google Chrome browser. What the benefit of that is it's being a web-based solution. So I can really deploy it anywhere to whatever device that we need or see fit. As you can see over my shoulder, we have a kiosk. That's a common device that people will deploy throughout their warehouse for people to go in, sign in either using barcode scans or using a username and password to sign in, really giving you flexible options to deploy this throughout your warehouse. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to sign in as Mr. Adams here, and we're going to start tracking our time for a day and then logging into a job. So I will apply my username and password and we will log in. All right, so now it's probably 6 a.m. I'm getting ready to start my day. So I want to clock in because I love to get paid. So I'm going to make sure I punch in for my day. Now, once I select in for day, it's going to provide me with two options. I can go out for day and out for break as time clock punches, or I can select to start a job. Now, one way to quickly create some efficiencies here is deploying barcodes throughout your warehouse floor, whether if that's barcoding your work traveler, your job traveler, any information that's important to this job, to barcode that with this specific information. Here, I'm just going to query a list of jobs that I have available within my system. I'm going to select bicycle assembly. We are creating bikes today, so I need to assemble them. Now I'm going to select what task or operation that I'm going to be working on, something that's more granular than just the job level. And now once I select that, I can select start, and now I'm going to actively track my time against this job. So I can really hone in on what is the actual time that I'm going to be spending in production today for a specific item. So we can get closer to what's our actual time versus what's our expected time. Now, as we mentioned earlier, skipping that runaround with documentation, we can apply notes and different attachments to this so that as a user, if there's something that's important to this job, whether if it might be that blueprint, I can attach it as a supervisor and now make it accessible to my users to see. I know bikes, they do have instruction manuals, so you do need to go through and see the different instructions on how to assemble it. So there's different key items that we have to be cognizant of. So now we'll log out, and that's typically what an end user is going to see. We want to make that as simple for them as Ryan mentioned. Let's not spend time tracking time. So we want to make it easy for them to log in, track their time, start working on a job, and log out. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to back up and bring us to the home part of our application. And we're going to log back in as an administrator so you can see the different administrative functions. So I'll sign in as admin here using my credentials. One thing that we like to do on almost every implementation is deploy those barcodes. As you can see, for me to type things in, it can be slow or cumbersome, but those barcodes really help create that speed and efficiency. So now as I log in, it's bringing me to my dashboard. Now there's a few key items that we want to focus on our dashboard. It's a great spot to just get comfortable and see what exactly is happening out on our warehouse floor. We bring in these different widgets from different reports that we can create. Now I know Hexagon Mining, as we talked about earlier, has a bunch of these different widgets based off all the different reports, because it's always about trying to make information easier to digest. I don't need to stare at different Excel sheets for days and hours on end trying to say, what's the pattern here? Where are we losing time? Where are we spending time? Let's create an easy, efficient dashboard to do that for us. So now I want to see, what jobs do I currently have within my system today? I only have 3 jobs. Wow, we must be slow, but I have 3 jobs of importance. So I'm going to select my B100 to start drilling into that information a little bit more. I want to see, what is my actual expected time for this job in total? How much time has already been allocated to this job, and what's that expected quantity? Now there's a few different things to note on this screen as well. Is going to be how many tasks have been completed or operations, what's the percentage of it been completed, and how are we tracking some of these efficiencies and the quality for tracking, say, good quantities or scrap quantities. I want to be able to track our performance, whether if it's based off of a user or based off of a job. Now there's certain functionalities
And Garrett, hey,
Go
Garrett,
ahead.
sorry, one other thing just to touch on this. We talk about you can't improve what you don't measure. So what's the purpose of tracking time? One of the things that's probably most important and kind of overlooked on this page here is that expected versus total time. When you're looking at your estimates for a specific job, and then you're able to report on how much time did we actually spend on that time, that's very important information. So for example, if you look at this one, we're expected to only spend 29 hours on this job, but our users spent 33 hours. Why did we go over by 4 hours? Is that a problem with our estimates? Is it a problem with one of the machines? Did one user just have an issue? Did we have scrap that needed to be reworked? What were those causes? That's really where the measurement piece really comes into play, to better understand, here's what we're expecting this job to take, because that's what we're making money off of, versus what did we actually spend? Labor is an expensive resource, so truly knowing those numbers is very valuable information.
Mhm. Yeah, that's great. Now, as we look with these expected times and calculated total times against this job, but how do we get these jobs, whether if it's going to be assigned to my user so they don't have to search or muddy through a big list of different jobs? There's a great tool of telling users what to work on, and that's what we call visual scheduling. This allows us to drop either jobs or tasks into different buckets, whether if that's a day, user, or department. I'm going to select users here because I like to assign it to a specific user. I can drag and drop what jobs I want to a specific user, and those tasks will go along with it. That's now going to be in Eric's queue for what job he needs to work on next. This has really helped streamlining those processes of saying, all right, I'm looking at this big board out on my floor that's saying, here's all the different jobs that are in production today. What is my specific job? So we really want to be clear and concise of what they're going to work on. Now, as we have our different users working on these jobs, whether if they're assigned to them or not, I can go to my users list and just get a quick glimpse of what exactly is going on for them. What's their status? What department do they exist in? How much total hours are they spending? Now, I might want to get more granular with this and see on a specific user level, what are their specific transactions for a day? What is their productivity? How much time have they spent against a job versus total hours? Such as, all right, he's only at 59% productivity. So he spent roughly how many hours on break versus how many hours he spent on a job. So just providing any supervisor or decision maker with that information to help further make decisions. Now I can go through and see his different work records and make decisions based off of where he's spending his time, and using some of this key metric information to say, okay, where are you actually spending your time? And then where's your productivity levels for each day? Now, and again, back to that dashboard, how can we make this information easier to view? Whether if it's going to be how many active users we have, what issues are we experiencing today? How are those jobs? And this ties all back to our reporting within right time, making anything available. Now, Ryan, do you have anything else that you'd like to add?
Yeah, so the one other thing on the dashboard and the reports within right time as we kind of wrap up, but this is really consuming the data. So being able to take that information and understand specifically how many hours did you spend in each work center? You can see that in the bottom left corner widget. So you better understand maybe we need more people over here, or where are our jobs at in the queue this week when we look at why is B113 taking so much longer than B100 or vice versa. You can really compare that data and understand how to better utilize it to really improve your organization as well. So that's really the real purpose behind being able to collect all of this so we can see this data and make effective decisions.
All right, now back to our PowerPoint. Now, obviously, we're always available if there is any other questions. Now, Ryan, can you see my PowerPoint?
Yep.
Or let's see, perfect. All right. So one of those big key areas after we can do this, if there's anything that's questions, feel free to reach out to us after this. We'd be happy to help demonstrate or show you further if there's something that you would like to see. Now, as we're completed with that, is there any questions that anybody might have? And we can open that up now.
All right. One question here. We aren't tracking time today. Where do people typically put their kiosks to track time, or how do they set it up?
Yeah, that's a great question, Sue. A lot of people will put their kiosks, whether if it might be at the front door where people are coming in to start tracking their time clock punch. Many times you're going to see your kiosks or computers or right time installed will be at different work centers spread throughout their organization. So everyone's not lining up at one specific area to sign in or punch into a specific job or even just a time clock punch.
Another question here. Can we just track time on jobs, or do we also have to track time clock punches?
Yes, definitely. You can track time just specifically against a job and not worry about those time clock punches. Now, the time tracking can be a big project overall. So if we start small and work our way up let's just start to see how much time we're spending in production versus how much time overall, whether we might have already a payroll provider that does that for us, or we're just focusing solely on that production time.
Okay, one more question here. We use time clocks from our payroll provider. So if we went with a digital time tracking solution like Right Time, could we eliminate those time clocks?
Absolutely. You could definitely eliminate those time clocks from your payroll provider. And one way of doing that, again, as I mentioned, is using those kiosks, or even if you look here in the near future, we will have applications that can be downloaded from either the iOS or Android, giving them mobile capabilities to clock in and reduce that need for those time clocks on the wall.
Okay. Another question. What kind of devices does Right Time run on?
Now, again, as I mentioned earlier, Right Time is a web-based application, so it can run on multitude of different devices. If it's going to be, whether it's my phone, my kiosk over here, my Windows PC, a tablet, really giving you full device flexibility. So it's not a break the bank type of purchase to buy different pieces of hardware to utilize this system.
All right. I think that's all the questions that we have.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for taking the time to visit with us. If there's any questions, feel free to reach out to the contact information you see on screen, and we'd be happy to help provide any information. And thank you again.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for joining us.